The recent freezing weather has damaged retail sales on the high street at a time when the industry needs them most. According to the MasterCard Spending Pulse survey, March spending rose 1.3% year on year, a 2.3% dip compared to February's growth. Many well-known high street brands are closing stores and slashing jobs. So what exactly is causing the turmoil, and what do experts believe that retailers should do to halt the decline? The retail sector is experiencing uncertain times, fighting against a maelstrom of change.
The downturn started around 2009, and then for the next couple of years, retailers still believed that things would go back to how they used to be. But that's definitely not the case anymore for a number of reasons. The key one is the influence of online, and retailers never really got to grips with the fact and the speed with which consumers would adopt online retailing. Secondly, it's the case that the consumer mindset has changed. There's a new reality about the way that consumers spend. They're not going to return to the sort of more frivolous way of spending that they did when credit was very, very cheap back in the early 2000s. And I think that now there's a realisation that there has to be a considerable shift in the way that retailers operate to counteract that.
We're witnessing the long-term redrawing of the entire high street retail landscape.
And what we're coming up against now is a succession of companies which can no longer afford to keep the large-scale physical presences on the high street that they have. So we've seen the likes of HMV and Jessup's and Blockbuster all failing this year. And I think for those individual retailers, you can see there's quite obvious reasons why they've gone bust. There's a major change in the way that consumers are buying their products. For example, HMV, that's moving to online, moving to digital downloads. Blockbuster also suffering from the move to digital products. And then you have Jessup's, whereby its compact cameras are now really being integrated into smartphones, which are being sold by different retailers. So we're seeing the whole process of what they're selling changing, and they're no longer being able to support the number of stores that they have.
Entertainment, electrical goods and clothing retailers all seem to be bearing the brunt, but why?
Part of the reason is that these companies expanded heavily during the credit boom, and there was no shortage of credit. And hence we saw that companies were able to borrow cheap money. Also, there was a demand in effect, because we were seeing, the consumers were more willing to spend money. And thirdly, I think these companies simply did not expand into the other channels. They were not multi-channel, so they were really relying on the single channel strategy, and that was really creating a boom in the high street. Another important fact is that I think we saw a lot of expansion of high street space. The retail space in general in the UK has nearly doubled or tripled over the last 10 years. And I think that you've got to fill those spaces. So I think prior to 2008 or 2009, there was this expansion which perhaps was not rational. And these are the industries where the typical disruption is happening at this point. The disruption in terms of the music and creative industries in general goes back to 1996 or 97. So it's been about 15 years in coming. And likewise, in case of the clothing, we've seen since 2000 actually the disruption emerging. And this, to some extent, can be attributed to the inertia on top of the executive teams who considered this business as usual and were not able to reinvent themselves. I mean, just look around yourself. If you look at the clothing, for example, the emergence of Net-a-Porter or ASOS or My Wardrobe are just the new business models. Why were not the companies which are high street retailers not able to reinvent themselves, or not able to create businesses within their existing business groups to create these new business models? And that's a big question. Why?
This bookshop in central London is one example of a retailer that's been left with little option but to rethink its own business model and diversify to survive.
We started as a bookshop primarily about 13 years ago in 2000. And the book world's changed immensely since, especially with the internet. and we've had to adapt quite a lot. So I don't even know that we could call ourselves a bookshop right now. I think we're kind of a hybrid somehow. We started as a visual art bookshop before the internet was everywhere. And the idea was that you could always get fresh, visual, interesting, art-related or design-related material in the shops. But now a lot of that material has been, people get it online. And so we have diverted into products that in a way are interesting or art-related or design-related. And that can vary from games to stationery to prints, t-shirts, just about everything that has creativity inside it.
It seems Magma Books might well be on the right track. Retailers do need to think twice about the range of products they offer.
I think one of the things they have to focus on is store investment. They have to provide a reason for people to come into their shops, to move away from from looking at websites to actually physically walking into their store, and it's only then that they have a real big opportunity. So that involves creating a store that's more about than just a place to pick up stuff. It has to be something that really engages the consumers, that really shows an understanding of the consumers and what they actually need.
But for the long list of high street retailers who haven't diversified, closing their doors for good has a distinct ripple effect.
Of course, there is an impact in terms of if you look at the local communities where these shops are embedded or the retail stores are embedded, a lot of people depend on in terms of the jobs. So there is the first is the impact on the local community in general. And second, I think, is the impact on the consumer confidence in general. That people tend to, when they see the foreclosures occurring in their areas, they're more likely to be careful in terms of spending. So I think that's a huge impact. And I think thirdly is the impact on the closure of marquee brands. And often there's an ecosystem which revolves around the high street. And often when you see foreclosures happening, the ecosystem going from services to other suppliers which are dependent on these are often locally embedded companies and locally embedded individual entrepreneurs, and that's a big problem for this ecosystem.
But do shoppers really mind when stores shut down, or do we just shrug our shoulders?
To be honest, I don't think that many consumers are that bothered anymore. I don't think that they have that same affinity with retailers that they used to have in decades gone by. There's no longer the independent stores where they know the store owner. It tends to be more identical high streets and big brands which operate in all of those high streets. And people don't feel the same way about them. So I think they're largely ambivalent about it. What they're more concerned about is the actual high street dying and not having that community there, and seeing those shops being replaced with bookmakers, pawnbrokers, and other things which aren't really adding to the community itself.
To say that the current market conditions on the high street are challenging would be an understatement. The owners of Magma Books recognise the implications of the internet from the outset.
Already when we were starting, we spent about a whole month deciding, even before we did a business plan, deciding whether the book still had a life in it or not as a product. And we decided, well, it probably has about 10 years of life in it. And it was uncannily accurate as a prediction, because funny enough, 10 years later, the book, I mean, we could not have started a bookshop, say 3 years ago.
Why do you say that?
Because, I mean, the simplest answer is a one-word answer, which is Amazon. So Amazon sells things 30–40% online, delivers next day. Well, you just can't compete against that. They say before the internet, if you wanted to know anything about a certain artist, photographer, anyone like that, you'd have to go and find a book or a magazine that had something about this person or that subject. Now you just Google anything you want and you have all the information there. So the role of books has changed considerably. And therefore, just having a purely bookshop like ours in a city like central London, with the rents we have in central London, is really tricky.
What does the future of the high street look like to you then?
The future of the high street it's difficult to predict, but what we are likely to see is an emergence of nimble players emergence of timber players who are able to successfully navigate across multiple channels, who are able to successfully complement their online and offline models, and also be able to use the data which they collect from the customer transactions much more intelligently, rather than just cross-selling or upselling, more about retaining the customers. And thirdly, I think the importance of the employees in this business is going to become much more central. Traditionally, the high streets have relied on low-paid front office staff and more relying towards self-serve technology, and that is going to reverse. The self-serve technology is not going to be the only thing which is going to make. That only reduces cost, does not bring or retain the customers.
Some independent retailers are recognizing that harnessing people's desire for technology is key.
So we're rebuilding our website around our own products that we create ourselves, that are unique, that Amazon sometimes sells them, sometimes not, but they wouldn't be able to discount it more than us. And so I think if you're doing something online, you really need to have a unique angle and a very sort of sharp angle.
But something's afoot on the high street. Peter Jones of Dragon's Den fame, along with a group of investors, recently bought camera retailer Jessup's. Birmingham, London and Aberdeen already boast flagship stores, and there are plans for opening more, as well as creating around 500 jobs. Meanwhile, 2,500 jobs are set to be saved at HMV, after Hilco stepped in with a deal reportedly worth around £50 million. It looks like the high street might well be fighting back already. Still, there's no doubt that British retailers are experiencing extraordinary times right now, and those feeling it most could be firms who aren't accepting the challenge of harnessing technology to rope in more customers.